Well, Dr. Nelson W. Rupp, it's good to have you here for this part of the video series that we're doing with the International College of Dentists. As you know, we've been collecting on videotape for the outstanding leaders in dentistry, and so it's a real pleasure to welcome you here and get a chance to share some of your life with me and, of course, all of the viewers. I wonder if we could start maybe at the end and maybe work backwards. You're recently retired now from the National Bureau of Standards.
Right, yes. I retired September 1st of last year from the American Dental Association at the National Bureau of Standards. And it has been a pleasure to be retired because they let me go back and work, which is one of my life joys. People ask me what my hobby is, and I said it's dentistry, and so that's what they still let me come back to the Bureau.
Dr. Rupp, tell me about the position that you held right before you retired.
The position before I retired was as Chief Clinical Scientist for the work at the National Bureau of Standards, where we were testing materials in the aspect of the handling of those materials. How do we handle the material so that we get the physical properties that the manufacturer wanted or designed in his making of the products that we as dentists and our assistants put together. In fact, we complete the manufacture of that material in the patient's mouth. So we were working on the physical properties that make that material more durable than it might be if it's mishandled.
It seems as if that's an interesting arrangement. The National Bureau of Standards, of course, is a national agency, and yet part of that is the American Dental Association. How does all of that fit together?
Well, after World War I, the Department of Defense at that time, called the War Department, from the Army Dental Corps, received a request that be a specification for the purchase of dental materials. There would be a federal specification. And the first one they tackled was the alloy for dental amalgam, because the amalgam was the product that was used the most during the war, and they could not get a good alloy that would be predictably set and do the job that they thought ought to be done. And in fact, when the dentists would get the material, the patients would be the guinea pig because the dentist really didn't know what they had. So they asked for a specification, and when the specification was ultimately developed, the American Dental Association saw what a great boon that was to dentistry to have specifications, and they were invited by the Bureau to come help, and that was in 1928. The first ADA employee went to the Bureau to help in the development of the specifications.
So the American Dental Association then is really helping to support the National Bureau of Standards in terms of the testing of dental materials?
I would say yes to that. I think it's supporting, and it's a symbiotic relationship. They're working together. And in fact, it's evolved now where NIH is providing money to the ADA and to the National Bureau of Standards to help support this work, because of the things, the different developments that have come out have worked toward bettering the delivery of dental care, and they feel that it is not just something for the Department of Defense, it's not just something for the American Dental Association, but the American public, the ultimate user of the materials in their mouths, is really benefiting from the use of that material, of the work that's being done.
Now you came to the National Bureau of Standards in what year?
I retired from the Navy in 1969 and went to the National Bureau of Standards. That was 19 years ago. However, the Navy, during my Navy career, had sent me there for 3 years of a training program, which I got a master's degree in dental materials from the Bureau and from Georgetown University. So really those three in 1954, 5, and 6 were the start of my time there at the Bureau.
What prompted the decision to go to the Bureau?
That's an interesting question. What prompted my decision was that I was in a training program at the Navy Dental School, and some of the people there thought that I had done some interesting work, and maybe I could profit by the additional training at the National Bureau of Standards. Okay, so that was the Navy side of it.
Mm-hmm. And then 1969, you're now completing the Navy, your Navy career.
Right.
And tell me about what happened then.
Well, it was right at that time that I had a job in the Navy that was probably, I felt at that time, was the best one I could ever get. From then it was all downhill. It'd be further and further away from patients. It would be more paperwork and so forth. So I was getting a little restless, but that it wasn't, I hope, too obvious to people that I was looking around. But and Dr. Paffenbarger retired. He was forced to retire by the ADA at the age of 65. Well, that came up about the same time, so when he retired, they had what they called a vacancy at the American Dental Association, and they invited me to come out and work with Dr. Paffenbarger, who continued on. Even though he was officially retired, he was still receiving some pay from grants and so forth, so I got to work with Dr. Paffenbarger, and it wasn't a difficult decision at all to when they invited me to come out.
Tell me about Dr. Paffenbarger. I've heard lots of different things, and I mean in terms of his contribution, but I'm sure you've had some first-hand experience.
How much time do we have? I could go for hours on Dr. Paffenbarger. He's such a genius at getting people around him to work and work with him to do just work above what you normally could do. I could go in and with an idea that I thought was real good, and he'd be sitting there, and if he'd go along with me, but if I'd see his eyebrow flicker up a little bit, I'd say, something I missed. I'd go back and review the literature, and sure enough, either he had done it or he knew somebody had done and had done exactly the same thing, and I said, so we'd go off on another one. But he was a doer. He got things done, and I think that's, if we have plenty of time, I mean, I don't want to take too much time, but he worked at the National Bureau of Standards and started in 1929.
So he got there almost at the very beginning.
He was 1 year after the start. And they wanted, the first one they brought in was Dr. N.O. Taylor, who later went to head up S.S. White Dental Research. And they wanted a dentist in there. N.O. Taylor was a chemist, and they wanted a dentist. And Dr. Brown in Ohio State, who was quite prominent in dental ADA research activities, knew Dr. Paffenbarger and invited him to come down. I asked the Bureau if they'd accept him. And he went down and worked. And then he got into the specification work at that time, which was further elaborating specifications. In fact, Dr. Paffenbarger was really the motivating force behind specification work in the United States and worldwide.
In dental materials?
In dental materials. Specification and certification of dental materials. In fact, we were pioneers in specification work. But he, during World War II, he was volunteered to the Navy. Went up to the Navy Supply Depot and did all the purchasing for the Navy supply program. And then when the war was over, he realized they had all this surplus equipment. And he knew he wanted a dental clinic at the National Bureau of Standards. He didn't have clinical facilities there at the time. So he originated a letter for Wilmer Sauter, who was the chief of the dental section, to go through the Department of Commerce over to the War Department and back down, requesting transfer of some of this surplus equipment. Well, he originated the letter that Sauter set up and threw, and it came back to his desk at Supply Center. And then he
now, William Sauter was who?
Wilmer
Sauter.
He was the original Bureau of Standards physicist who started the specification work on dental amalgam.
I see.
1919. He was a physicist with a PhD from Chicago, some of the top.
So this is how all these people fit together.
Right.
Sauder had been already working on amalgam specifications as a physicist, and Pfaffenberger got there in 29.
Right.
I see. And then 41 years later,
Sauder was very active all through. You're referring to what when you say years later?
Well, 41 years later is when you showed up on the scene.
Yeah.
Well, with the interim of getting your master's degree at the Bureau.
Well, but in that section of time when I was at the Bureau in '53 is when Bob Nelson developed the high-speed rotor contraangle water turbine, and John Kompla and the Air Force developed the panoramic X-ray, which was really a brainchild of Bob Nelson's, but he was
yeah, one doesn't recognize, I guess, easily, unless one follows it, the tremendous contribution that the Bureau of Standards has made over the years.
Right. It is the contributions of those two and the development of composites have generated enough cost effectiveness for the American dentists that it's really saving the public millions of dollars a year in dentist time, dentist fees, because of not needing to replace restoration so frequently and so forth.
Those two refer to, you said composites, and those two?
Those two are the air turbine, the water turbine, which was later converted to air turbine by the Navy, and then the panoramic X-ray. And
the panoramic X-ray. And of course all the work that was done in terms of amalgam.
Right. The amalgam work that Wilmer Sauder started, I think, is really, it was a carryover from what G.V. Black and the rest had done. But one of the things, the first thing that Sauder noticed was that when he was trying to make a specimen to test in the laboratory, how difficult it was to make a good specimen. And then he went and studied how the dentists were handling it, and he said, well, no wonder they don't get real good results. They're having the same problem I'm having. So he got very, very intensely interested in handling of the material, not just the making of the specimen and not just testing it.
I see.
And that's where, if there were any contributions that I've made, I hope it's been in trying to get the dentists to be able to handle the amalgam, composites, burrs, whatever they're using to drill on the teeth and prepare the teeth, so that they can handle them in a manner that would be most effective.
Okay, well, let me come back to something you said just a little while ago, that when you were in the Navy, right before you retired, that you thought that you had the best job in the Navy.
Yeah, but for me, I should say the best job that I could have, and that was head of the education part of the Navy dental school at Bethesda. And that was, you get to work with some of the really people who have ultimately become real top people in education. Here at Oklahoma, there's Dr. Tao that came from that program and so forth. So there are a lot of people who have come out of the Navy program, but it was such a inspiring group to be with. It just made you feel like you were right at the cutting edge.
Now, these people that you were involved with in the Navy at that time, they were coming through as trainees?
Trainees and staff. Yeah, Dr. Tao that I mentioned, who is here, is at Oklahoma, was one of the students that came through. But faculty members, people in operative dentistry would recognize some of them as Julian Thomas, who later became chairman of operative at Northwestern, and Wade Hagerman, who became director of clinics at UCLA, and Paul Farrell, who's chairman of operative at Temple. And these are the people that, when you get to work with people like that, you know you've been someplace.
Did you ever imagine when you were first getting involved in dentistry that you were going to end up that many years later? And
if anybody put a crystal ball, that would have been the last thing I would have seen. No,
What did you see?
You know, that's a good question. The only thing I saw was that I needed to do an awful lot of work to be able to develop to the point where I could do something. The experience I had in dental school was excellent, but then when I got out of dental school and went to Navy Training Center, you just can't believe the difference of this. It's sort of like, as I had mentioned before, but the idea that I grew up in a small town and I was a big wheel in high school athletics and so forth. Then I went to college and I was just another little wheel in a big place. So when I graduated from dental school, I thought I knew something. But I got out with people from Minnesota, Northwestern, and UCLA, and College of the Pacific, and saw what they were doing. I thought, oh my land, we've got to get down to work, and that was, I think, one of the best things that happened to me.
Well, let me track that through a little bit, because I think there's some things that I think would be interesting. You grew up where?
In a small town in Ohio called Granville, where Denison University is. There were 1,600 people and 42 in my class, and all the way through from first grade to high school.
Granville, Ohio.
Granville.
And you mentioned that athletics was important in high school. What?
Well, I was raised in under an athletic father. My father was All-Ohio in 3 sports when he was in college, and football, basketball, and baseball, and he was coaching the Denison football team, and so that was me in those days, playing football and basketball and baseball. That's all that was life, except in the summertime we went fishing. I mean, that was dentistry or academics or anything else were. I was a typical young fellow that was a little bit of ability, but a lot of pull and so forth, and hard work. We had a good time.
And so you went to high school in Granville, and then college
at Denison.
At Denison,
right?
And Denison is where?
In Granville.
Right there in Granville.
That was hometown. Going from hometown, living at home, going to college, and. Which I don't really recommend to people. I think it's better if you get away, because I really didn't get away from home till I went to dental school.
Where along that point did you decide that you were going to go from sports to dentistry?
Well, when I realized that sports had no future for me, I mean, I was still interested, as my wife will still attest to my being glued to some of the athletic events on TV. But it was an idea that I was actually majoring in math and physics. I was going to go into physics, and in first 2 years of dental school. And, I mean, undergraduate school.
Yeah.
And about the middle of my sophomore year in college, I decided that I didn't want to get into the big business. I didn't want to go to work for a big company and so forth. I thought I wanted to be my own boss and so forth. I wanted to go into so I looking around, and our local dentist was a good dentist, and he was well respected. In fact, we had 2 good dentists in that small town. And he had treated me well, and I enjoyed my relationship with him. In fact, if I had something that was bothering me, I didn't ask my parents. I'd just go down and get an appointment on my own. It was wasn't something that I knew it needed to be done, and he stimulated me to think that this might not be too bad.
What was his name?
Dr. Davis. L.E. Davis was. He was 70-some years old when he placed some of the amalgams I still have in my mouth. This was in 1935, he was, he kept right up. He'd come back from conventions and meetings in dentistry and show me things that he'd brought back. One of the items he brought back was a strand of the cable from the Golden Gate Bridge when they went to an ADA meeting in San Francisco, and I just the type of man that hey, this wouldn't be too bad.
And so at that point you decided to get out of math and physics and sort of move into a pre-dental.
Take the pre-dent courses. completed my math and physics major because there wasn't any time. It wasn't 2 years. You can hardly get a major in biological science or chemistry.
And then you went to dental school where?
At Ohio State, 1939 to 43.
Had you considered other dental schools, or was?
No, I didn't even. I wouldn't even known there were other dental schools to go to, but it was just 27 miles away, and it was there, and I just wanted to go. That's all.
So you stayed pretty close to home.
Well, I don't know as it stayed. In those days, that was 39. Money wasn't all that plentiful, and you weren't going to travel very far to go to school. And yeah, no, the home side of it, I don't think had a factor. It was just there.
What was dental school like for you?
It was interesting. It was. I think I had a good time while I was in dental school. It was. Again, how much time do we have? Because, well, going there from college, from pre-dent, a gross anatomy course under Lyndon Edwards. We only had 60 students in our class, and he knew every one of us. And it was a good family, but boy, I was working hard. At the first midterm, I got a 66 on the test, and I thought, gee, I ought to do better than that. And I was really down and digging, and I wasn't depressed, but I was working hard. Sitting there at the cadaver one day, and Edwards had the habit of coming around with his clipboard and asking spot questions, and he came up and stood behind me for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I know he could see my hands shaking as I was sitting there, and he came up and looked over my shoulder and said, "Can you tell me the difference between Lowell Thomas and a sweet potato?" And I got just willed on the spot. And I said, "No." He said, "Well, Lowell Thomas is just a commentator." And I thought, well, I mean, that's what I needed. I needed to be relaxed and go at it. And he did a good job. And that's many people in dentistry know Carl Boucher. I don't know whether you know him, but he was a very austere person, and he took over the chairmanship of prosthodontics my freshman year. And he was one we respected, but we were afraid of. And my junior year, day before Thanksgiving, I was delivering my first complete upper and lower denture that I'd ever completed. But here it was the afternoon before Thanksgiving, and I was the only one in the clinic. And Dr. Boucher was the only faculty member. And he had not seen the case from the impressions to the bite registration, to the centric, to the vertical, to everything, to the setup, which we had to check off before we did. And I thought, oh my land, how am I going to handle this? So after I'd been there for about half an hour or so, he came by the chair. He knew he was the only one. He knew I was the only one. He knew how I felt. He came up and said, "Is there anything I can do?" I said, "Well, I want to deliver this complete denture." So he said, "Do you mind if I look at it?" And so he gets in and checks the centric and the vertical and the aesthetics and everything. And he takes them out of the patient's mouth and puts them together and holds them up and looks at them. And he looked at the patient and he said, "Do you mind if we go into my office for a few minutes?" And he said, "We'll be back. Just relax, and we'll be back." So we went back in his lab, and he took a hand file, which he uses, and he took that denture, and he went all the way around the upper and the lower denture, describing every anatomical landmark, every muscle attachment, and everything that went on that. He went around that denture and filed that thing down till it was just beautiful. Explaining every bit of it all the way. And then he got it all done and looked at it, and any similarity between what I had and what was purely coincidental.
All with a hand file.
Yeah, all with a little hand file. And he had a little rubber block that he had set it on and do it. And then he said, now you don't know anything about polishing, as evidenced by what I'd done, so I'll polish it for you. So he went over and showed me how to hold it on the lathe to get the right contours and the flanges and so forth. And he gave it back to me. He says, now take this out and give it to the patient, deliver it. I did. Patient went home, enjoyed Thanksgiving meal, came back Tuesday the next week without a single sore spot. Right. So you can see what, here was somebody that I had utmost respect for, that I had no idea, yet he took me one-on-one, and that was one of the best things that ever could happen to me as a young dentist going through. And well, as of today, I still get thump bumps thinking of the time he spent with me on that. It was real great.
Yeah. And that was how many years ago?
Well, that was 1941, so that was 47 years ago. But it's still a real vivid impact on it. Yeah.
Were there other people at dental school like Boucher that had that kind of influence on you?
Well, yes, I'd say there was Dr. Strohsnyder in operative, who was chairman of the clinics, really. He had charge of the diagnosis and sorting of patients to make sure we all got patients that we needed and so forth. And I had fortunately done enough work in my junior year that I had a chair right near the examining room. They sort of allocated the chairs according to what your standing was and so forth, and instead of alphabetically, which we started out as. Anyhow, as we were going along, I was still interested in sports, and the World Series was on. So I was down in the lab listening to the World Series. And that was the year that Enos Slaughter practically single-handedly beat the Yankees for the Cardinals in the World Series. And I was just all hopped up. I thought, boy, that's great. And I went up talking to him about this World Series game. And he stood there and sat there and nodded and agreed and so forth. About 2 or 3 days later, he came around and he said, he says, I wish you were as interested in dentistry as you are in sports. Wow. Something like that doesn't hit you until after 3 or 4 days you begin to think, hey, what am I doing?
That's right.
Yeah. Where is my interest? And it just sort of slid around into that atmosphere, and it was fun. It was good. It was. That's the type of thing I think that students need. I think they need somebody in the faculty who knows them, and they know the faculty member. I mean, I'm afraid with large classes that students don't know the faculty, and the faculty don't know the students. And I think this is the only way you can really teach good compassion for the patients.
When you were getting to the end of your dental school career now, had you some thoughts about what you were going to be doing in dentistry? Was it private practice that you were gearing towards?
Well, remember it was 43 that I graduated, and we had all joined the Navy in our freshman, sophomore year, so we all knew we were going into the service. So that wasn't, but all the time, to answer your question, yes, it was private practice strictly. But we were thinking at that time of the Navy, which again, as I mentioned, went to boot camp where there were 400 dentists, and I worked with all these different school graduates.
Where was that?
That was Farragut, Idaho, which is now closed. But it's there were people there that really makes you, out of 400 dentists. And one of the things that I was real disappointed in, Charlie Stebner was there at the same time, but I never met him. I didn't even know he was there. And but I would sure like to have gotten to know Charlie at that age.
And did you spend the 2 years at Farragut?
About a year and a half, and then overseas. Yeah, that was probably had the safest duty in the Navy up in ADAC and the Aleutians. There were no jungle fever, no diseases, no nothing. There was just no war.
No war.
We were taking care of the personnel aboard ships that were being that were coming through there on the way to the war, or coming back and so forth.
And the war ends, and what happens to you?
The war ended, and I went to Dayton, Ohio, and practiced private practice for close to 2 years before I went back into the Navy.
Tell me what prompted that decision?
It's a decision that wasn't easy to come by, because when I went, I was associated with a dentist in Dayton, and the day I walked in the office, I was booked solid for 3 weeks. And can you imagine that? I mean, can a young fellow graduating today walk into a situation where he has 3 weeks of patients? I think probably the thing that stimulated that more than anything else was after about a year and a half, I began to see some of these patients coming back, and the work didn't look just the way I thought it was going to look after when I put it in. When I placed the restorations, I thought, hey, those are pretty good. And then they come back, and I said, there's something wrong. I've got to do something better. And then I just remembered those years of working in a clinic with 4 or 5 dentists, and all of them sharing knowledge and working together. And one day I said to my wife, I saw one of those War Department things that they need you or something like that. The finger was pointing at me, and I looked at my wife and I said, you know, I think maybe they do need me, and I need them. And so she went along with it very, very readily.
So you were looking to go back to that stimulation of working with a number of dentists in a clinical setting? And
the educational opportunities, because I knew what the Navy was sending people to school, to graduate school, and so I knew those opportunities were there. And I don't know, it was after about a year and a half in private practice, I'd get home in the evening and trying to go to sleep at night, and I'd sit there and I'd jerk and twist all over the place, and I said, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? I mean, I'm not going to last long fighting this thing this way. So yes, I felt the need to be more confident what I was doing was doing right.
Right. So you came back into the Navy then after about 2 years in private practice. And where along that line did dental materials start to become an interest of yours?
That Navy dental materials didn't come into the picture until, about 8-10 years later. 2 tours of duty and duty at the Navy Dental School in the graduate program, which was at that time was a 6-month general dentistry course, where I got to work with people like Bob Wilcott at UCLA, and people that were really good. In fact, Bob Wilcott was the one who recommended and invited me to go down to work at the National Bureau of Standards. So it was that was about the time, but it was after about 2 years of 2 tours of duty.
What prompted the movement in that direction?
I can't say that I was prompted to move in that direction, other than I guess at that time, when I would finish my 6 months at the Navy Dental School, someplace where you could be for another 2 years sounded pretty good, because my children were in the 1st and 2nd grade, and I thought, well, if I can stay here and work for 2 more years, I was sort of like dental school. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, I knew Dr. Paffenbarger was there, and I had a lot of respect from him. Even back in dental school days, the professors talked about Dr. Paffenbarger because he was from Ohio State, and so I thought, well, I can't pass this up. This is an opportunity that, in fact, up till then, I thought I'd going to go into prosthodontics and be a specialist in prosthodontics, but I felt that the broader picture of general dentistry was more appealing than the specialty, and that, again, too, the idea that when you get a tour of duty back where your kids can stay where they are, family to me is an important thing. I've always tried to make family the #1 interest.
I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit, but at that point, you went. You were at the National Bureau of Standards and also got a master's degree at Georgetown.
Right. Yeah, and worked with Dr. Hess on the biochemistry department. He was the moderator of the academic leader of that program. Right. And then when of course there in the Navy, you got to rotate and go. I went aboard ship for 2 years, and it was probably one of the more happy times because I had just finished school and I had begun to feel like I knew something about handling these materials, and I was able to, and I was seeing some restorations after a year or 2 years, and you could see a difference, and things were made. I've always, recently read a book by Hans Selye, which he says that happiness is not a remote destination in life. It isn't something you work toward or for or anything else, but it's a way of traveling. And I think that at that point, dentistry really became fun. It was able to do what I do for the patient. I mean, it wasn't that I could do it, but I was doing it for the patient.
You started to say at the very beginning of the interview when we talked about what you felt your major contribution was.
Oh boy, I don't think there is any.
Well, it had to do with
no earth-shaking contribution, but I hope a few patients are still chewing with their own natural teeth that I've worked on and helped to stimulate. I mean, I feel the patient is my first priority, but although I feel that if there's been any contribution, it's been through the manipulation of the materials so that the dentist can understand what they're doing with the material when they mix alloy and mercury to make a dental amalgam, or when they mix a powder and liquid to make a cement, or when they do these things and when they place them in the mouth, what they have to do in order to make that material have the physical properties that were designed in the manufacture of that material. I think this is one area, and then I worked also followed in Dr. Paffenbarger's footsteps for the specification program internationally and nationally, and up till when I retired a year ago, I was chairman of 5 different specification committees nationally, and 3 of them internationally. So that has consumed a good bit of time. But I think it's worthwhile. A lot of people will say, what is the most important thing that's come down in dentistry in the last 50 years? Okay. And you look at the high-speed turbine handpiece, you look at the panoramic X-ray, you look at composite resins. But where would we be without specifications? If you were going to take an impression with an alginate material, you'd like to know that that material is going to set in 3 to 5 minutes like it's designed to set. You'd like to know that it has a certain degree of accuracy, that it'll reproduce a certain line, fineness of texture. Well, we have over 60 of these specifications now for even into X-ray equipment and X-ray film and things of this nature. So it's hard to say what is the most important thing, but if we didn't have specification, every patient, as I indicated earlier, would be a guinea pig, because you wouldn't know what you were using.
What about Nelson Rupp? I mean, if someone was to say, what would you, if you had to look back on your professional career and point out what you'd like to be best remembered for?
That's a... I really don't... I don't know what would be best remembered for, but I do hope that people look on me as a compassionate person who loves his fellow man and wants to do what I can do to help fellow man. I've often had I have a saying that's in the back of my mind that I've always kept paramount, and that is, it's amazing what can be accomplished if we care not who gets the credit.
If we care not who gets the credit.
Who gets the credit, right. And I feel very strongly that there are a lot of things that we contribute to, and I couldn't care less who gets the credit for it, but I hope it gets done. And I've had a lot of students. I still have 2 students from Georgetown, graduate students, and I have about 4 graduate students from the Navy Dental School that I'm working with. And I for 11 years was a national civilian consultant for the Surgeon General of the Air Force. And I go around and discuss handling of dental materials in operative dentistry with the general practice residents in the Air Force. And I think these are things that I'd like to influence on fellow men.
Why don't we stop at this point and take a little break?
Yep.
And then there's a whole bunch of things that I still want to talk to you about in terms of.
So you're the boss.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we take a little stretch and then.
Good. Get back to the water. Get back to this city gin, then, fellas.
Dr. Rupp, you've had a chance to survey the dental scene over a long period of time, and I'm wondering if you might reflect for just a few moments on what you see happening in terms of dentistry.
The dentistry, I feel, and in the period of time that I've watched it, is there's somewhat of a pendulum swing that. And another item, too, in regard to that pendulum swing is that I think a lot of times somebody will focus on where that pendulum is at a certain time. It's sort of like taking a cup of water out of the Potomac River as it flows through Washington and saying, this is the Potomac River. Well, that may have been near the Dickerson power plant where it's at 80 degrees temperature. It may be just above there where it's something. Anyhow, I think that we look at dentistry sometimes with a little too microscopic of a view and how it's going. There are a lot of people currently who are saying that dentistry really didn't become scientific. There wasn't really any good dentistry done until 20, 30 years ago because we didn't have the equipment to do certain scientific developments that we have now. Well, granted, we don't have them. However, I think the dentistry that was done 1900, I wasn't here then, but I say in 1900, was based on what was known then. The year of 1827 doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but in that year in a small town in Ohio, there was a Dr. Harris who took in young dentists and trained young people, and actually had a controlled program to train them to be dentists. One of his graduates of that was his brother, who, Chapin Harris, went to Baltimore and was co-founder of the Baltimore College of Dentistry. But these people in their day were very advanced, and they were doing what was known then. We come down through the years to what people say in the 1940s when I graduated, is that all we knew how to do was to drill, fill, pull, and replace. Well, that's again, they're getting too fine a focus on what was done, because we were taught, as was the case of some of W.D. Miller's reports back in 1880s, where he and several others said that a clean tooth doesn't decay. Well, we were taught that, and we were taught that as part of our preventive dentistry. We were taught to help patients learn how to get a clean tooth. And later, Sumter Arnhem and Bob Barkley and some of these people publicized how to clean the teeth, and I think this was a big step forward. So I think the preventive aspect of dentistry has evolved, and where we are today, 20 years from now, we look back and say, gee, they didn't know anything about it. It was horse and buggy days.
Where do you see it going? I mean, what will dentistry look like 20 years from now? 20
years from now, I can't see that dentistry is going to be all that different. Yes, we're going to have fewer cavities in the young people. I think the pedodontists are finding that out now, that the young individual doesn't have the caries rate, and there's just not that many teeth needing to be filled in that younger population. So that's going to change the picture of what we're doing. However, people are retaining their teeth a lot longer. And those teeth that are retained longer are going to be exposed to the insults of the oral environment and become carious. Fluoride doesn't prevent decay. All it does is makes a tooth more resistant to decay. An example of that is my son, who is 38 years old now. He's had fluoride and topical and fluoride toothpaste, fluoride in the drinking water, fluoride in toothpaste ever since he was 4 years old. He didn't have a single cavity until a year ago, and I had to put 2 inlays in his bicuspids because of his eating habits and oral hygiene habits. They just over-insulted the teeth. So the teeth are still going to decay regardless. I mean, people aren't going to change their habits. We've got to either change habits, but the theory's there. We could guarantee every patient that comes in at the age of 10 or 11 that they would have their own teeth at the age of 96 if they would follow our directions and we kept up to time and gave them the right directions. So I think that eventually we're going to have less maybe of the caries in the enamel, but as these patients get older, and a lot of these people, I hope I'm still living 20 years from now, and I've got I've got 28 teeth. I had wisdom teeth out, and I'm sure that the roots are maybe exposed a little more than they are now, and the roots are very vulnerable. And we old folks don't necessarily abide by the rule of no sweets between meals. We're going to nibble on a chewing gum or sucker or something, I mean a mint of some sort, and we're going to cause it to decay. So the teeth are going to be there to be restored. So I think the dentist in the future is going to have to know, he's going to have to know a lot more and be able to deliver a lot more than we can deliver right now.
In what way?
I think he's going to have what I often use the expression, he's got to have a full bag of clubs or a full deck of cards. He's got to know whether he's going to need a Fisher sealant for a tooth or whether he's going to want to open that tooth and put in an amalgam or even a direct goal. He's got to know the whole gamut of materials And then if it's a root caries on an older patient, he's got to know whether something like the glass ionomer cement now, which releases a little fluoride and has some adhesion, can be used as a root caries reparative material. So he's got to know how to handle all of these materials and do them right, not just do them once in school to graduate. They got to learn how to do it and do it right. I do not vision the dentist being somebody who sits behind a desk and writes prescriptions or something of this nature. He's still going to be a hands-on treatment person that is going to be working directly with the patients, and I don't see him delegating that authority.
How well do you think the dental schools are doing in preparing that person?
I think most of the dental schools are doing a real good job. I'm afraid that they are, some of them are beginning to cut back on the amount of time in the operative clinics and operative laboratories. And if you'll pardon another story, but I liken it to the airline that had 50% fewer passengers. Therefore, they trained their pilots 50% less time. The name of the airline is the Crashmore Airline.
Yes.
So I think that that type of thing is what we need to ward against. We need to keep the hands-on thing, and I'm afraid too many of the academic programs or some of the academic programs are going too far in the direction of neglecting the finer art. Dentistry is, and I'm not saying this because I'm 70 years old and graduated many years ago, and I hate to be pulled dragging and screaming into the 20th or 21st century. I put in my first incisal fracture repair in 1957, so I think that this is something that wasn't heard of until about Reganos and Welk and the group at Kentucky wrote an article on in 1971 using Bonacor's acid etch technique. Well, I didn't use acid etch, but I did do a little microscopic prep that was for retention, and then painted in the incisal, and the boy went back to his own dentist, and he walked in, and then it sat in the dental chair, and he's a family dentist, and he said, "I thought you were going to let me put that jacket crown on." And he said, "Well, look at it closer." And he looked and saw it was just a little ribbon of where the fracture was. So no, I think I'm at the forefront of where we are. And we're doing bonding on saucer preparations, which I certainly don't recommend at this date, but maybe I reserve the right to change my mind. 6 months from now, we'll say, this is the way to go. So yes, these are things, but they've got to be done right again. I can't.
Let me ask about a material that you didn't mention, and I know that you've just recently been president of the American Academy of Gold Foil Operators. True. Where does gold foil fit into this picture?
I think it still fits very, very firmly in the picture, and that is going to rankle a few people, but it is one of the most permanent materials we can use. I have pictures of direct gold that were placed over 50 years ago, and they're still functioning and beautifully. Granted, they're gold colored. In fact, President Reagan has a direct gold in one of his teeth that was placed in a small town in Iowa over 50 years ago. So I think that this type of thing is what we need to think about in the use of it in selected small areas, so that it will be done once, and you don't have to go back and do it again and make it bigger, and then do it again and make it even bigger. I think we need to. It's a demanding restoration, But I think Earl Collard will agree with me. It's not near as demanding as it is almost boring in the fact that you place one pellet in and then you place another and you keep doing the same thing over again for a few minutes and in order to get the restoration correctly placed. It's just that during that time you don't dare have any contamination. But don't for a minute think that when we do get a bonding agent where we can plaster some filling materials on the roots of teeth, that we aren't going to have that dry, chemically clean surface in order to put that restoration in also. So the rubber dam is going to be even more and more and more important. And also it fits in with the picture of sterile technique.
Let me change course for just a little bit. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned about how important your family is to you and your career. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I've tried to make duty changes and my lifestyle center around them. I know if they ever see this, they'll say, what's he talking about? He never paid any attention to us. But there are a lot of things that, a lot of times that I probably could or would have been away from home that I knew I better not be. And these are things that I tried to keep in mind. It's a matter of it's a hard thing to pinpoint because well, both our children were in the Vietnam era college age, and I don't think either one were involved in the Vietnam movement, but they were in that atmosphere. And this is one place I give my wife all the credit because she kept that communication line solid. She never let that communication line break down between us, mainly between her and them. And that was the thing that really, I think, has brought us to where we are now with two healthy people on their own. And it's important to have that atmosphere. I don't know just how to pinpoint my position.
We talked earlier about what you considered your major accomplishments. I'm wondering if you might take a second and tell me if you have any regrets. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think I would. I think all my involvement in sports as a youngster and not getting into academics sooner, I think it contributed to my development and growth. If I'd have been a bookworm earlier and really gone into it, I don't feel I'd be near as complete in my own feeling about things. And I certainly would not have chosen another profession. I think that as I often tell the young graduates, I just love to trade places with them because they've got a great time to be entering the profession. I think if I'd done anything different, I'd have joined groups in my specialty of operative dentistry a lot sooner. Because I think that is a message that needs to be gotten out to every recent graduate. Is that when they graduate, to join a national group in the specialty that they're interested in, whether it's endodontics or whether it's operative or whether it's periodontics, get into that specialty and join a study club in their local area. Whether it's a book study club or a clinical study club. And I think that is the big advantage of the Academy Gold Foil operators is that we have clinical study clubs. Mm-hmm. We operate in a study situation on patients where we evaluate each other's work. Mm-hmm. And I think these things are extremely important for the young graduate. I don't know where we can go, but from that I take off on another little tangent, and that is that I think one of the things that young graduates look at a restoration and feel that it may not be quite what they would like. When does one stop pursuing perfection? When does one stop polishing an amalgam or polishing an inlay or polishing teeth? When does one stop scaling for calculus? How does one know that they've got every last bit of calculus before? How do they know if they're equilibrating and occlusion that they've got it right down to the last gnat's eyebrow of perfection? I don't think they ever know. Because I've often made the statement that the perfect restoration has never been placed. It may look perfect to us now, and it may, some of George Hollenbeck's work that we see over 50 years later still looks perfect, beautiful. But I'm sure if George looked at it, he'd tell you something that he should have done a little differently, or it would have been a little bit better if he'd have done it just this way.
And what's the lesson?
So the lesson is that don't worry about don't be discouraged because you're not perfect. Don't be discouraged that you aren't doing it exactly the way. Hope that each time you place something that you learn, and the next time you do a little better. There was a doctor in Boston around 1900 who did a lot of lecturing, and he had a saying that if he were struck dead today, he hoped that people would judge him by the restoration, the last restoration that he placed.
The last one.
The last one that he placed. And sometimes I say, gee, I hope they don't look at that last one I placed, because it doesn't always turn out that way. I mean, but the idea is to keep striving, keep trying to make it better. Use every disappointment, every thing, as the old expression goes, every failure as a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. We can grow as we go. So it's kind of an evolved, winding answer to your question, but I think that
important advice.
I think it's important that they do join them, and that they do keep working, because there's nothing like working with your peers. They look at things and see it just a little differently. And that's what we do in these study clubs. We operate in front of our peers, and
when you look back on your career, do you feel as if there's anything that's unfinished, undone, things that would still need your attention?
Well, I just feel like every day is another day to improve on what I've been doing.
Where are the priorities?
Priorities are in getting this. At this point, we feel we've just about got a bonding solution that will bond a restoration to the tooth structure. And if we can get this, and effectively, I'm not actually doing the clinical work. My replacement, who is doing an outstanding job, is doing all the clinical work. We're about 6 months into the study, and it looks like we might have something that will make it a lot easier, save a lot of tooth structure, and end up with fewer split teeth and so forth. So we feel that this type of thing is just something that's constantly evolving that needs to be have attention.
You're not ready to quit.
Oh my! I hope they let me keep coming back. No, sir. It's too much. It's too much fun. If
I was to ask you to come up with 3 adjectives to describe yourself, what would they be?
I'd almost come out with the first one saying confused, because I don't know. I hope that one of them, as I mentioned earlier, is just compassionate, and I don't know. There are adjectives. I think along that same line, it's still the compassion or empathy, and I'd like to think of maybe I'm stimulating to people to be the best they can be, not satisfied, not quit or not settle. And I'd like to see a little more enthusiasm among young dentists and so forth. I'd like to see them, as the doctor told me, and when Dr. Stroh-Snyder told me when I was in school, I wish you were as interested in dentistry as you are in baseball or sports. I go to a lot of dental meetings and I hear them stand around talking about golf. That's great. We all need a diversion, a relaxation. We need to have something that will give us a respite from our daily grind, and also give us time to let the subconscious mind work on what we're doing. But that doesn't need to be the sole thing.
So compassion and stimulating, and one more.
Well,
I won't let you use confused.
You won't let me use confused.
No.
Because I think I am confused. I mean, I just don't see anything. Because nobody could say I'm a good dentist. I just do good dentistry. I mean, I try to do it, but it's not the work that I would like it to be. Or teacher or anything of that nature. Just I'm afraid I'll just have to let somebody else come up with an adjective on that.
Let the rest of the world find a third.
If there is a third, well, let me know. I'd be glad to know what that is.
I think there are plenty in there that you alluded to. I think you certainly have served as a teacher and as a model and as a stimulator and as a person to emulate in dentistry.
Well, I don't know about that, but it is a comfort to know that some of the things we've worked on, Earl Collard and the rest of them, we've worked on a lot of things together, and it's an ever challenging proposition. I do feel that when you talk about dentistry today, you were referring to the picture today. When a lot of people look at it, I think a lot of people look at cosmodontics as one aspect of dentistry. Well, again, they're looking at a small aspect because we were taught to shape of teeth, the colors of teeth, the positioning of teeth, and so forth. And in fact, I heard Ron Goldstein give a lecture up in Minnesota and on one of the programs, and he was talking exactly the same thing we were taught in 1943 of parallel lines and not causing any obnoxious angles and so forth, and how to blend them all in. And then we've got materials that can help us do that now. I hate to see people get too carried away, because I had one of the co-workers at the Bureau of Standards asked me the other day, he said, can't we get these materials so that they won't turn yellow after a few years? That's a problem. We put them in, and a few years the things are, and so yes, we're evolving into better cosmetics, but that's not. We got to remember that what we're doing is for the patient, not for our benefit. I think that there's a lot of people who are are carried away a little bit with the idea that what they're doing isn't necessarily best for the patient, but it sure helps my pocketbook. And I hate to see that. But I don't think it's different today than it was 40, 50 years ago. But that pendulum will swing back and there'll be something else.
Yeah. We talked about George Pfaffenberg as being an important person at the Bureau of Standards. Another name that you mentioned was Nelson. Tell me a little bit about him.
Yes, Bob Nelson was a most unique, imaginative type of individual. He was a dentist, graduated from University of Minnesota, and he's always thinking about something that can be done. In fact, one of the things he developed real early was a front surface mirror for our looking at teeth with our hand, little dental mirror. And he's always had little gadgets like that. And then he got the idea that he could, ought to be able to get a contrangle handpiece that was small enough to get in the mouth with high speed. If I don't know whether you remember, but about that time they came out with the airbrush, where we were, SS White marketed this matter of cutting a tooth with high-speed air sandblast cutting. He said, well, if you can do that with the high speed, but you haven't don't have much control, he said, wouldn't it be better if we could get the handpiece to go that fast, and then we would have the feel. So he developed, he designed equipment to do it. It was kind of interesting that right at the same time he designed that, he was designing it, Teflon came out. It was invented. And the machinist that he had working with him took a piece of Teflon and used that for the bearing. And that's what made the thing possible to go that fast with a little Teflon bearing and the water hitting this turbine and the turbine directly driving the handpiece. So they got this handpiece up, they got the speed, and up around 65,000. And first time Bob used it, he put it on the tooth and it stopped. And he tried it again and it stopped. And he did. And he just laid it aside. He said, no good, it won't work. About a year later, he picked it up, looked at it again, and then he very gently touched the tooth and realized that if he touched it very lightly, it cut the tooth beautifully. And then all of a sudden he realized, hey, I don't want the torque. If I had torque at 65,000, if it gets stuck in there, it's going to spin the patient. I mean, there's no. I mean, it's going to be a real wicked thing. So that was with a breakthrough that he realized that he could take a diamond burr, and at that time carbide burrs were just coming on the scene.
Interesting.
And he could take that and cut the enamel very gently with a brush touch and just brush the tooth away. Well, it was a real nice handpiece that he developed because he had a collet like a machinist's lathe that seated the burr. So that burr was running true. It was the truest running burr I think has ever developed. And so when he cut the tooth, he cut just what he wanted to cut, and he didn't have any wobble impact and so forth. So that was, but it was a cumbersome. He had to have a big tank with a pump, water pump, and so forth that made the thing operate. And there were two Navy officers who saw it and said, gee, that'd be great for a field unit if we could put it on a tank of compressed air instead of having to have a pump. So it was just Bill Ludwig he also a Minnesota graduate, and Kurt Schantz, who later made Admiral, said, well, why don't we put our machinist to put this on, see if we can't develop an air turbine. So this is where the original air turbine came, was from their idea that we would have a field unit. Then that was when the Borden air rotor came on the market soon after that, and it just took off. I mean, as anybody who used it realized, hey, we've got something here. And,
it changed dentistry.
It changed patient comfort. It changed dentistry. It was a real step forward. But he also, Bob Nelson, in addition to that, when he was at the University of Washington, he was the original dental materials department at when the University of Washington in Seattle was organized after World War II. And as he was there, he brought over from Europe a Dr. Patero from Finland, a P-A-T-E-R-O, Dr. Patero, who was using the extraoral movement of using the laminograph technique, and was an expert in that, and was getting pictures, slicing and so forth, and doing it for different parts of the body. And Bob got to working with him and thought, well, we ought to be able to do this in the mouth. Well, the first one he developed was he had an intraoral source with the X-ray film around the between the lips and the teeth, and he got a pretty good panoramic picture. But then he had to source inside the mouth.
Right.
So then it was about that. At that stage, he was transferred to the Bureau. He was employed by Dr. Papenbarger to come to the National Bureau of Standards. And he brought with him a John Kumpula, who was a machinist par excellence. He was imaginative as well as an outstanding machinist. And the two worked together on it. And then Bob Nelson stepped aside when they needed some funding, and the Air Force funded it. So Bob really was not in the picture of the credits for the development, but he was really the motivating idea behind it. But and then John Kumpula is the one who arranged the mechanism so that the head of the X-rays emitting and the film moving at the same speed would cut right on the middle of the right through the teeth and give us a laminograph of the whole arch. And it's interesting. As a sideline to that, these things bring up all kinds of stuff. But a sideline to that is that this was introduced. The blueprints and the pictures were shown at the IADR meeting in about 1955 or 6. It was 5 years before the first manufacturer came around to look at that design and so forth. They said, this is a gadget, nobody's going to be interested in this. So Colonel Hudson, who was working with John Kumpula, said, let's, Air Force, let's ship it down to Lackland and run some boot camp personnel. So he ran about 4 or 5 companies of boots through with the panoramic as they were getting their dental exam, and came back with all of these X-rays, and they turned up an awful lot of pathology. They turned up a whole mouth, and they realized what a terrific record this was of the induction into the service. Sure, of the entire dentition. And that just opened the door. It just blossomed after that. But I say it took that little extra effort by the Air Force to demonstrate that it did do something besides just a toy or a gimmick that somebody was playing with. A lot of times we don't visualize these things, what they can do for us.
Let me shift gears again. I know there's lots of things in terms of our earlier conversation that serve for you as guiding principles and things that you've experienced and things that you've read. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the principal thing, there's so many things, but the principal one that has borne more fruit in my way of living was reading a book of Hans Selye's called Stress Without Distress. I think a lot of people in the stress field will know Dr. Selye's work. He's expert in the field, and he's done an awful lot of work. But this little book is about that thick, and it's in the paperback, and it takes, first time you read it, you can read it in an evening. Second time you read it, it takes a couple of weeks, and then the third time you read it, you take a couple of weeks to a chapter. But the philosophy of it is that the stress should not be, that we all need stress, that we all thrive on stress. Even sitting here is a stressful situation. but we all thrive on that stress. It's not a frustrating stress. It's not distress. And I think probably the most important aspect that comes from that is that expression, happiness is not a remote destination to which we are searching or traveling, or we're not going someplace to be happy. It's getting there, it's the traveling. And this is his, the philosophy that goes through it. I've never felt, I mean, I've always felt the stress. I shouldn't say never. I've never felt that dentistry was not a stress. But standing beside a chair operating on a patient is a stressful situation. Stress for the patient, stress for me as a dentist. It's something that, though, as I indicated, when I began to feel like I was really doing it right and doing it that I thought was well, then that stress was no longer frustration. I was talking about my practice in Dayton, Ohio, where I was at night I'd be ready to go to sleep. I'd be lying there and relaxing, and all of a sudden I'd practically jump out of bed and my twitch. Well, these were the muscles of tension that were being relaxed. I think if I'd have had that philosophy and had the skills and so forth, that it would have been a lot different. Because as I look on it now, it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's a stress that we need. We all need stress.
Tell me about happiness as a pathway. How has that been applied to your life?
Well, I think it's being applied. I mean, I'm even in retirement, I didn't look forward to, that wasn't a goal to retire so I could sit back and play golf and fish and so forth. And I still go to work and enjoy the contact with patients and enjoy contact with the materials. This is happiness to me. A lot of people, they look forward to retirement as when they get away from the burden of the chore or the demands, the everyday, oh, I've got to go to work today. Expression, thank God it's Friday, TGIF,
right,
is completely foreign to me. I don't understand that expression at all. As Friday is another day to do, and not something to get over with so I can do something on Saturday and Sunday. That's a happy time. I mean, the happy time is all week. By happiness, I don't mean sitting here laughing at a joke and or watching a terrific competitive Super Bowl on television or something. Yeah, that's fun, but that isn't what I call happiness. The fun is laughing over a joke or having a good shot in a golf or batter that goes, the side play that goes along with it. That's
and happiness?
Happiness is the continual joy of what you're doing, the life, living it to the fullest.
As long as there are folks like you around to keep pushing us.
Keep pushing that pendulum back. Well, then maybe we dampen it a little bit. Yes. It doesn't swing quite so far. Yeah.
Well, that's super. Well, I've certainly enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you. That was just really super.
Well, thank you. It's good. I appreciate the opportunity to be with the International College in this program. It's a real good, it's a good, but it's challenging.